The Bournemouth University logo is shown on screen with the title Eating Disorders Awareness Week 2015, A War Inside My Body, Battling Childhood Trauma by Sarah Clark. This video is part of the Equality and Diversity outreach work being undertaken at BU. The screen is laid out with a presentation on the right hand side and a small video in the top left hand corner above the Bournemouth University logo. First slide shows sunset over Bournemouth Bay and the title A War Inside My Body, Battling Childhood Trauma by Sarah Clark.
Hello, welcome. My name is Sarah Clark. I'm a student occupational therapist at Bournemouth Uni. I'm in my third year. I've just got a job working in mental health, in a mental health rehab ward in Dorchester when I qualify in June. And I also work on the bank as a support worker at St Anne's Hospital, so I've kind of worked there for the past 2 years. I never thought that I would be standing up here today telling people my story. There had been many times that I had lost all hope that things would get better, so I feel privileged to be able to stand up here today and speak to you. And also the subject matter, in terms of actually speaking about it, when I first approached James regarding the subject, I think it took quite a lot of thinking about and how it would work because of the sensitive nature of the topic. So I'm glad that we've kind of pushed all the boundaries and I've been able to, as a student, been able to speak to you today. And I hope my story can give hope, which I feel is one of the most important principles of recovery. One of the reasons that I really wanted to do this talk was it's something that's not often talked about. You hear a lot of people giving their stories of eating disorders and mental health, but not many people talk about things like childhood trauma. And this, I feel, it reinforces the shame that people experience when they're wanting to tell people about it or they're wanting to discuss it with their family peers. It's similar to the stigma experience of mental illness. And you probably agree that in the last few years that in terms of people being able to speak about it, it has improved gradually, where people have been able to speak about their experiences, and the stigma has lessened to some degree. And when I looked at some research to do with eating disorders and abuse, there was researchers have found that girls abused before the age of 16 were twice as likely to experience an eating disorder. I know there's plenty of risk factors, but I feel this is quite a significant one that isn't talked about. And studies also show that the one thing missed during eating disorders assessments was that, and if we don't talk about it with people who access services, how can we kind of expect them to speak about it in a way? And for me, it was a really important part of my recovery. I wouldn't have gone into recovery if I wasn't able to kind of speak about that, because it was a really kind of important thing for me to be able to talk about. Just going to go through the aims of the talk.
Slide reads aims of the presentation, my story, the link to body image and how gaining weight for me made memories resurface, how anorexia kept me safe and kept me protected. Give hope that despite childhood trauma you can lead a fulfilling life. Challenge views that is something that should be talked about more. How exercise helped me attain a more healthy body weight.
So I'm going to speak to you about my story, and I hope that you have a better understanding of the challenges that individuals may face when dealing with childhood trauma and having an eating disorder. So I'm going to look at the link to body image and how gaining weight for me made memories resurface, and how anorexia kept me safe and it kept me protected. I'm going to give hope, hopefully, that despite childhood trauma you can lead a fulfilling life, and challenge views that it's something that should be talked about more, and how exercise has helped me attain a more healthy body weight. Next slide.
Slide shows the title My Story with images of Sarah in various locations at her wedding, with friends, with her husband and swimming.
Okay, so it's just some photos of obviously the life that I've got now. So my story, I was brought up in Devon, originally from Devon. I only moved up to uni when I attended university here. I live with my sister, there's 18 months age gap between us, so we had quite a lot of sister rivalry when we were younger, which I'm sure she was here today, she would definitely agree with. And my parents split up when I was quite young. Can't really remember what age, but I remember my dad not being around that much. And between the ages of 7 and 10, I was sexually abused by a family friend. This sort of started off with me staying over at weekends. Gradually, over the years, I kind of, I knew it was wrong what was happening. I kind of said to my mum, "Oh, I don't want to stay over." I didn't actually tell her what the plan was, and I wanted it to stop. I didn't feel able to speak to my mum, so I spoke to quite a good family friend that we had, and then she told my mum, and my mum's reaction was a lot of she blamed me. Well, she didn't really say it was my fault, but she was very angry. She was worried about social services getting involved. She didn't want to be seen, understandably, as a bad mother. So I had a lot of shame that it was my fault as I was a child. And I remember that night that it all happened. I told my mum, and social services and all that sort of stuff happened. That I remembered went to the cupboard. I was about 10, and I took some pills. It wasn't to kill myself, I don't think. I think it was just to escape, really. I just felt, oh God, I don't want to wake up the next day. I don't know how to cope with everything. I don't blame my mum. My mum's got a lot of mental health problems herself, and I knew she loved me, and I feel that it was her way of expressing the guilt and anger towards what had happened. She obviously, understandably probably felt guilty, and that, it was her way of expressing what happened. Reflecting on this event now, it wasn't just the abuse that really affected me, it was my mum's reaction. And this led me to feel feelings of shame and guilt. And this carried on throughout my childhood and, still today to some degree. When you're young, you're very influenced by your parents. And I grew up where I had such intense guilt. I feel that if it was handled better, I feel that maybe my mum's reaction was different. If I had some support from mental health services at that age, I feel that it would have, lessened the impact that it had on me. And I personally think that early intervention within mental health services is so crucial before it gets to that stage where you can't, you've experienced stuff for so long that actually when you receive the support that, you're not in that place to actually be able to take in that support and gain from having that support. So up until the age of 13, I guess I didn't begin to experience any mental health problems till about that age. And I was bullied at school. Home life was quite difficult, and I began self-harming. This was a way I don't really know how it happened, really. I just started to self-harm, and it made me feel better about what everything was going on in my life. At this time, my mum had, quite a lot of mental health difficulties, but she was never really diagnosed at that time. And my mum and dad had a very on-off relationship. They wasn't around. My dad wasn't around when the abuse happened. And I had a lot of anger growing up, which I couldn't express, so I kind of expressed that in ways like self-harming and other ways, which began when I was about 15. I started to develop puberty and things. I felt vulnerable. I was never a skinny child. My sister was seen as a slim one, and my mum reminded us of this. I was sort of seen as the pretty one, and my sister was seen as she's quite thin and clever. So we both grew up thinking that I was dumb and that she was ugly. So I started to binge and purge as this kind of blocked out how rubbish I felt. I didn't really lose weight for it. It was around this time also that I started taking overdoses. Became very depressed from the age of 15. My sister went into foster care at this time, and my mum was also very unwell. She had a few hospital admissions for trying to take her own life as well. And I did a performing arts course at at college when I left at 16 in dance and drama. And then I didn't really know what to do. I didn't go to uni. I'll take a year out, and I got a job in a bar. And I was quite vulnerable at that age. I was sexually assaulted by my boss at work, and some of the girls told me to be wary of this man. And so I thought, I wasn't going to go to the police, but I went to the police, and the way they handled it was, again, I was left to feel that it was my fault. I was a silly 18-year-old girl, thinks their boss fancies her, and so it wasn't handled very well at all. And then from this, memories of being abused as a child resurfaced and the guilt got worse. And so this is when I remember like the anorexia really starting to take hold. I gradually started to lose weight. I wasn't overweight, but you know, when you're at that age, you think, oh, I could do with losing a few pounds and things. It felt good. I had compliments, people telling me, oh, you look good. Gave me something else to focus on as well. I found it helped block out memories. It made me feel better about myself. And as I lost weight, I gave me a sense of control, something that I felt that I could be good at, something that was mine. I'd always been a perfectionist, and actually it was something that I could be good at. I've got control, I can lose weight, I can, you know, still remember feeling the excitement of seeing the number go down on the scale, like, you know, like I've won the lottery or something. It would be that sort of feeling. And the guilt that I had from my childhood and growing up, that transferred into eating certain foods where I couldn't allow myself things that were deemed as treats. And it was all about deserving things. I felt I didn't deserve food, I wouldn't buy stuff for myself. I felt I deserved everything that happened to me, and I had this very self-hatred for myself during this time. It took a while for anorexia to be noticed. Eventually my mum, with her mental health, she became aware that things weren't right. So I went to the GP, and his reaction was to go home and eat some burgers and come back in 2 weeks. Obviously the burgers didn't get ate. I came back in 2 weeks and I'd lost weight, and gradually I was quite in denial at this time. I couldn't say the word anorexia. It just didn't apply to me. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't even apply that person of someone with that illness to myself. And I got referred to the community mental health team. And at this stage, my illness had pretty taken over. I didn't want to gain weight. I couldn't see that I was, you know, I was underweight. The illness had kept me safe. It'd been my safety blanket. And I look back on photos now of when I was unwell, and I think I'm shocked at how awful I look. But I remember that taking that particular photo and actually having that photo taken, thinking, oh, you can lose, your arms look a bit bigger there, you know, your legs are a bit big. And I remember like thinking that, you know, you can lose weight there, and it's, you know, now, and I think it was like so strange, like how I just think that when you would look in the mirror and just see this fat person. And eventually I had to leave work. I was working in a mobile phone shop at the time, and I had a few general hospital admissions, so I was admitted to like a general hospital side where I had quite a few physical problems in terms of, as gradually when you do become very underweight, you experience things like heart problems and to do with the malnutrition side of things and kidneys. And so then I eventually agreed to admission to a specialist eating disorder unit. I knew deep down that I really couldn't carry on, but part of me wanted me, you know, to go to hospital. Part of me was terrified. I had severe depression, and part of me wanted the illness to kill me, and the other part wanted me to, you know, try and lead, you know, try and get better somehow. I had 3 admissions over the years. First time I admitted to hospital was a strange, you know, I've never sort of been in a hospital before, but I felt accepted. There was people there with pretty much the same problem with me, so I had friends there. When I was unwell, I lost lots of friends. Gradually, people drift apart. A lot of social occasions involve food, and obviously that was an anxiety-provoking event for me. So I lost a lot of friends over the years. They went to uni, and also the staff cared. I'm not saying that my mum never cared for me. She really did. But I felt like a carer for my mum. When my sister went into foster care, I was, you know, looking after my mum, and I felt a lot of responsibility for my mum. And so I felt that, you know, actually having staff there that I could talk to really helped. Obviously, a lot of people with eating disorders hated the weight gain side of it, but there's part of me that I admit now to that secretly enjoyed the food, although I'd never admit it at the time. And I remember people saying to me, oh, don't you miss things like chocolate? And I was a bit like, oh yeah, I do actually. It was never about that I didn't enjoy the food. It was just that it controlled me, and the only way that I could cope was through not eating, and it just became a coping mechanism. So each admission I have, I felt like it was let out of prison, really. In fact, one staff member even said that to me, and it was that, that feeling of relief, but also that feeling of feeling scared. And as I knew, as soon as I left that hospital, I'd be losing weight. After each admission, it was almost a cycle. Over the years, I would lose weight, I would not meet up with my CPN, so I disengaged from the services, until I eventually got caught out and had to be readmitted. The illness made me very secretive and, get to know all the tricks in the book, how to cover your weight up, and I had some therapy in the community, but I wasn't ready for it. I feel it's like bringing a horse to water. If it doesn't want to drink, it's not going to drink. I wasn't ready for the therapy. I just kind of did it as that's a thing you're meant to do when you're unwell. You're meant to receive treatment. But through each admission, I did learn more about myself. I began to open up, and each admission I got a bit stronger, really. I kind of developed different skills to use. For many people with anorexia, a big fear, obviously, is gaining weight. And for me, that was about losing my identity of anorexia, really, and becoming a woman. It kept me safe, it being my only friend's comfort blanket, where I felt that no one could hurt me. Whenever I gained weight, I began to experience flashbacks from what happened in my childhood. And I also knew that if I was to gain to a healthy BMI, it would involve relationships and finding out who I was, which I don't think that I was prepared for. The third admission that I had, which was the final one to an eating disorder unit, was the worst that I'd been physically and weight-wise. And it almost felt like a game, like how low I could go before I got caught out. I couldn't stop the laxatives, the compulsive exercise. I hated the illness, but at the same time, weight gain terrified me. But mentally, I was the wellest that I had been. I was ready to change, and I wanted to change. And over the years, I had that insight into my illness, which I didn't have at the beginning of when I became unwell. And I was also very physically unwell. There was one time that I remember being tied up to a heart rate monitor in the hospital, and I had to go into intensive care. And I remember at the time thinking, oh God, I don't want to die. I'll promise, if I get through tonight, I'll eat in the morning. And, and I had this, I was like, although I want to die, I really don't want to die. And so I remember that. And then the next few days when I came out of hospital, I'd get home and be faced with a meal, and it'd be like, no, I can't. I've survived this. I can survive. You always think you're invincible. Like you can, you always hear the horror stories of people dying. And the fact is, you don't ever think that it would happen to you, and you think that you can be the best at it. And actually, the best anorexia is a dead one. That's the only way that the illness has actually won. So during my inpatient treatment, I started work with a psychologist regarding the flashbacks that I was experiencing, and so we looked at grounding techniques, and it helped me come to terms with what was going on in my head. And also, the unit introduced a form of dialectical behavioural therapy. Unlike traditional DBT, which is for people who experience a lack of control, it's for people with emotionally over-control. So I've tried CBT before, which was about changing my thinking pattern, but I had the thinking pattern for so long that I couldn't change it. And it works for some people, but for me that wasn't the right thing to do. And I began to find ways to manage distress and grounding techniques, and it's something that I can use in day-to-day life. It's something I can use now, and I think it's something you can use in any stage of recovery as well. I think it can be useful for anyone, really. we all experience, you hear on, people on Facebook, oh, I've had a bad day, I'm going to have a glass of wine, or, I'm going to drink loads and stuff like that. And we all have unhealthy coping mechanisms, and it's about kind of finding coping mechanisms. So it's something that I'm quite passionate about. I find it really good. So after that admission, for me, hospital was really about, I guess, getting me out of a crisis, and it saved my life, if I'm perfectly honest. There'd be times where I was, very close to, not surviving. But one of the most important things I did for my recovery was I went into supported housing. Every time that I went home, I went back to my mum's. It always resulted in relapse, where our illnesses both fed off each other. I felt like the carer for my mum, and the relationship was never really a healthy one. And even when I started to recover, our relationship grew apart somehow, because she still saw me as a sick person, and she didn't like the fact that I was, becoming well again and having my, our relationship kind of changed from that moment. So I entered supported housing. At this time, I was still a low weight, but other things had to improve before I could begin to overcome the illness. Previously, recovery to me was seen as a cure in hospital, when you had to completely let go of your illness. It was like there was no kind of middle ground, and I couldn't imagine living without anorexia. Could it be my only coping mechanism? And then from the place that I was in, they had a very recovery focused approach, and I began to see it as a way to manage my illness and do the things that are important to me, whether or not I still experience symptoms. So I learned a very long journey of self-discovery, and one of which I'm still on today. I began to find my own identity and to break free from the constraints that my illness had on me. During this time there, I also received therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, which had led me to cope with unhelpful coping mechanisms. It was challenging, as when you receive a therapy of that sort, you begin to experience what had happened to you. But the supported house place, they gave me additional support. It was a staff 24 hours a day, so they had someone there at night. So when old memories came to resurface, I kind of, began to find ways to cope, and it was difficult at times. I would return to unhealthy behaviours, but that was a kind of a learning process for me. And I found ways to manage the flashback and the memories, and also accept my body growing into that of a woman. I began to accept that the abuse, it wasn't my fault, and I felt less guilty. And also the anger that I had, that I hadn't been able to express, I was able to express that during therapy as well. The one thing that really did help my body image was exercise. I know it's a red light when people with anorexia exercise.
Slide shows a picture of Sarah on a push bike.
And at first it was a way to please the illness, I'd always struggled with over-exercising, but I took up cycling, and it wasn't just the cycling. It gave me a purpose, it gave me an identity, and something that I felt that I could be good at. Big part of, with my illness was about thinking that I could be good at something, thinking that something that I had of my own. And all the years that I was ill, I kind of lost sight of who I was. And it's very easy to see yourself as an illness and not as a person. And to almost take anorexia as a career. Why? Because it feels comforting, it feels safe, it's within your comfort levels. It's the same with people who don't like changing jobs. People can stay on the same job for years, but actually change is difficult for a lot of people. And in all honesty, I was scared of growing up and scared of who I was. Exercise also gave me feelings of euphoria. It was similar to the feeling that I got when I lost weight. So when I saw the number go down on the scale, I'd feel really pleased. And with cycling, I used to love going on long rides, and also I'd never been able to do things gradually. So I'm very much an all or nothing person, which meant that cycling 60 miles a day was a relatively easy achievement for me. And as I've been used to pushing my body to extremes, and I couldn't recognise feelings of hunger, tiredness. I've always pushed my body. So I, of course, had to be aware of this over the years, and a lot of people who know me say that I do like to keep busy, but gradually I've tried to, I've learnt now to be able to handle that better and learn to rest, which is important as well as keeping busy. So that's something that, that's taken me, a while to recognise. And when I thought about recovery, I didn't wake up overnight and decide, oh, today will be the day that, I'll be magically recovered, I'll eat 3 meals a day and 10 snacks a day. Things gradually led up to it. I began to find my own identity. The illness had been my identity for so long, and I was beginning to find out who I was. I remember attending my younger sister's graduation.
Slide shows an image of Sarah at her sister's graduation.
And that was, quite difficult, because my younger sister was graduating, and here was me going back to my supported house place, and I sort of thought, what can I need to do something with my life. And I was at the stage where I was, getting into recovery, and I was still, I wasn't, wasn't a normal weight at that time. And then I thought of training to be an occupational therapist. I I remember the OT I met on the wards, and she had been my DBT therapist, and she helped me move into supported housing. And I also remember doing some card making. I know OT is not just about card making, but I thought, oh, that sounds like fun. So, and so when I looked into it more, I realised how my own activities of cycling had really helped my recovery. And when I think about it now, it's only now that I can recognise how important it is to have routine and meaning in your life, which is a big role of, occupational therapy in terms of giving people that structure. And so then I thought of training to be an OT. And over the years, I also became closer to my dad. When I first became unwell,
Slide shows a picture of Sarah with her dad.
he thought it would just be a phase, something that I would snap out of. He didn't really understand what the illness was about. He almost thought it was to do with, like looking like a model, wanting to be thin. But over the years, when he saw how unwell I got, and he also understood what it had been like living with my mum over the years, and I was able to speak to him openly about my illness, and I also opened up to him about the abuse. And when I told him that, he really understood why this happened and why it led me to become unwell. And we've still got a very close relationship now. Although it's, sometimes people think it's easier to talk to, females. Actually, from the side of my family, it's easier to talk to my dad about things because he really understands and he really does kind of get it, if you know what I mean. And so I applied to do an access course. This was challenging, as despite all the work I've done in supported housing, I was quite institutionalised. I didn't know how to have kind of normal conversations with people. The people that I had, conversations I had with people in hospital and in, mental health settings, and not the, it was about, that nurse or, what staff are like and things like that. And it was never really like, stuff. And people in my course, they had babies, families, children, and I'd spent most of my teenage and adult years being involved in the mental health system. So I felt quite alone. I remember crying for the first few weeks, thinking that I don't know if I can do it. My illness has given me a lot of determination. I was very determined to lose weight, and this determination has now transferred into getting myself better, and with applying to uni and doing the access course. So I did stick out at it. After the access course, the route was to university. I was meant to go to university after doing my access course, but my place was actually deferred by the university. It was a decision that I don't agree with now. Luckily there's no OT lecturers in here, so I don't think so. But that I feel that more support needs to be given to students who may experience mental health problems at university, to realise that you can actually work within mental health if you've got lived experience. There's a project that, if anyone works for Dorset Healthcare, that I'm involved with, called Hidden Talent, which is about recognising the lived experience of staff. And I think that's really important for students to be aware of, that I was told that I couldn't have a mental health placement for my first 2 years. I had one in my second year and I got, very good mark on it. And it just shows that just because you've had an illness, it doesn't change who you are. And actually, you've got the skills to be able to, engage with that person, and you know what it's like for that person. And so I should thank them really, as I met my now husband.
Slide shows a picture of Sarah in fancy dress with her husband.
Okay. Having a relationship was a very big step in my recovery. I was 24 and I'd never had a boyfriend. Due to my bad experiences with men, I never thought that I could ever trust a man again. And also at this stage in my life, I became a born-again teenager.
Slide shows an image of Sarah with a bottle of cider in her mouth.
I admit now to even being young for my age. Most people know me, I've got more Hello Kitty stuff than most 7-year-olds have got, but I don't care. I think when you do become unwell, I didn't kind of grow up, if you know what I mean. So I'm not saying I'm immature for my age, I've got, being a carer for my mum, I did grow up, but, there's this sort of side of me that actually hasn't experienced what it was like to be a teenager. So I started going out and, you know, I met Andy on one of those £6 a night bottle of wine nights. And I became close to this girl in supported housing, and we used to go out on nights out. She'd been in hospital, so we kind of had a really strong relationship. And alcohol helped my confidence, and I'd only just allowed myself to drink because of the fear of calories from it. Me and Andy went on a few dates.
Slide shows a picture of Sarah and Andy.
And started to get to know each other. I was very nearly a normal body weight at this stage, so I was feeling quite uncomfortable in my own skin. Unfortunately, during this time, my friend in supported housing died. It was initially presumed that she took her own life. It turned out later on that she didn't, but this event really affected me. I kind of blame myself a bit for it. You do, I think, with people with, you know, with mental health, because you think, oh, what if I could have done something? And I became really unwell. It was still with, I lost quite a bit of weight at this time, but it was more so with the depression. And me and Andy had only been together a month, and I took quite a few overdoses in that time and ended up being sectioned in hospital. So I sent him a message saying, you know, I'm a bit crazy, I don't think you really want to be with me, expecting him to run for the hills as I presumed that, you know, most men would, only been together for about a month. But despite this, he stood by me. And sorry, I might cry. Gradually, I opened up to him, and I began to trust him. I realised that he loved me for who I was. It took a lot of time and patience, and I can truly say I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't because of him. I never thought I'd be married, let alone have a relationship. And he restored my faith in men again. Being honest with him about my experiences has made things so much easier, and I would encourage other people who work with people who've experienced similar things to just be honest and just be there for each other. We are now married, and he is studying to be a mental health nurse.
Slide shows a picture of Sarah and Andy on their wedding day.
A career that he wouldn't have chosen if he hadn't have met me. When I first met Andy, he was working in a coffee shop. I worked in a pub at that time, actually, and I said to him, oh, you're very caring, you should go and do a caring job. So we got a job in a nursing home. And he said the most difficult part was working out the difference between a petticoat and a nightie.
Do you know now?
And I said to him, he's so good with me, and so he decided then, when I moved down to Bournemouth, we both went for an interview at St Anne's Hospital together. We kind of, at that time, we couldn't let people know that we were together, so we kind of pretended that we didn't know each other. We both got the job, which was good. It would have been a bit awkward if one of us got the job and the other person didn't. And since then, he's recently had a placement, actually, within the eating disorders unit at St Anne's Hospital. It's a placement that he really enjoyed. I'm just glad I didn't put him off. And I know that a lot of people who've worked with Andy have said what a great nurse he is as well.
Video fades to black. If you would like to find out more about the dignity, diversity and equality work at the university, please contact Dr James Palfman-Kay, Equality and Diversity Advisor, email diversity@bournemouth.ac.uk, www.bournemouth.ac.uk/diversity.